All right, listeners, I think you know that we are part of the Radiotopia network, which is basically a network built on the idea that you should support the most creative, independent audio makers around. No one, and I mean no one, embodies the Radiotopia ethos more than Benjamin Walker and his show Theory of Everything. Benjamin, who I've known for a long time, has been making beautiful, personal, sprawling audio documentaries for decades that help us understand the very strange world we live in. And now he has a new series called Not All Propaganda is Art. The new series goes back to the 1950s when Western security agencies like the CIA paid artists, writers, and intellectuals to fight the cultural Cold War.
The CIA funds were free. I mean, no one was told what to say.
Gloria Steinem, activist who sees the CIA as a sort of enlightened pal or rich uncle, there is another viewpoint.
Look, if you're listening to this show, I know you like secret histories. I know you like a mix of culture and politics and shadowy figures. So what are you waiting for? Not All Propaganda is Art from Benjamin Walker. You can find it now wherever you listen or at theoryofeverythingpodcast.com. This episode is brought to you by Progressive, home of the Name Your Price tool. You say how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. It's easy to start a quote. Visit Progressive.com to get started. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, March 27th, 1973, it is Oscar night. The glitz, the glamour, the actors making political statements, all the traditions are there. But this moment is probably the most fascinating in Oscar history when it comes to political stances, because on this night, actor Marlon Brando declined the Academy Award for Best Actor for a performance that really revived his career, The Godfather. And instead, the Native American actress and activist Sacheen Littlefeather attended the ceremony in Brando's place, took the stage to accept the award, though declined taking the statuette itself, and then stated that Brando very regretfully could not accept the award as he was protesting Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans in film. We'll read a bit more of her actual remarks because they are really amazing. It's quite a remarkable moment. But let's talk about Brando's protest, the larger context of Hollywood at that time, and of course the even longer and ongoing context of political statements at award ceremonies. Here to do that, as always, is Nicole Hammer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
And our special guest for this episode is Amy Nicholson, film critic and host of the wonderful film podcast Unspooled. Amy, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, this is my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
And this is running on Oscar Day, so happy Oscar Sunday to everyone. And I guess if you're listening to this tomorrow, who knows what kind of political statements took place at this year's Oscars. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised given war and
one or two might sneak in.
All those things.
I know. We're due.
Got a prediction, Amy, that you can make now, and then when you make predictions, but it doesn't come out until the ceremony's out, you only have to lose here by making a wrong prediction. So go ahead.
I have to admit, I find this year's nominees so boring. I can't even get invested in the fight. Oh, is that terrible?
Well, I suspect who airs the Oscars? ABC? That might be freaking them out as well, that there's a little bit of a...
Yeah, me,
so
film critic, does not care.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not good news.
Yeah, exactly. So where do we start? I mean, do you want to start with Littlefeather herself? I mean, really a remarkable person who I think in some sense gets written out of this story as much as it's about her on stage. But Amy, I'm assuming you sort of know this moment. Is there other stuff that you feel like doesn't get talked about when people talk about this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of what gets misunderstood about this moment is because of the spin that newspapers put on it immediately after. I mean, they went after Sacheen Littlefeather. They said she wasn't actually Native American, which was a lie. She is like half Apache, half Yaqui. They even today still sometimes refer to her as Brando's stripper. Dennis Miller did that on his show not too long ago. She had posed for some nude photos before this event, and then afterwards Playboy put them out in a spread, and so then everybody just thought she was in it for fame. And really everything that got spread around her like dismissed Brando's actual intention, which was like, this is a moment when, non-white native peoples of America have not had their voice heard. I want somebody to get to speak up on stage for 85 million people watching this live. And she's still a part of the story that's been left out despite those intentions.
It's an incredible moment. It's a clip on YouTube that I encourage listeners to watch, but I play it in my class when I'm teaching a course on history and film. And I think it's what's so remarkable to me is that when the award is announced, she walks up to the stage and then they try to give her the Oscar and she is sort of like, no thanks. And then, as she starts to give her speech, it's weird. You hear boos.
Yes.
But then there's like a hand clap and it's like, oh no, we're not clapping. Okay. And then it's so awkward what is happening in that theater. And I think there was a lot of, if you were sitting at home watching it, you were probably like, wait, what is happening? What is going on?
Yeah. The clip itself is remarkable. And if we could do a little beat by beat of it, because she gets up there and introduces herself and she says, I'm representing Marlon Brando this evening. He's asked me to tell you, he's asked me to talk to you. She also says he's written a very long speech for me, which I'm not going to read tonight, which I think is good because the worst look would have been like she starts reading it and then gets played off with those violins or whatever. That would have been disastrous. But then, Kellie, the boos do not come. I will say, this is my reading of it, until she actually says what she's up there to do. It's not just, who's this random person? But she says, I'm here to talk about the treatment of American Indians in the film industry. And then people boo that. And that was the part that just made my jaw drop.
It's even worse.
And her composure, that then she kind of hears the boos, says, excuse me, and she doubles down and she goes, and on television and movie reruns. She does not get cowed by those boos.
And you can't see it in the clip, but there's a lot of chaos that is beginning to break out as she gives this speech because John Wayne, who she could be speaking directly to, given the depictions of Indigenous people in his films and television, is rushing the stage to try to make her stop talking. And a little bit later, Clint Eastwood, who also probably felt the hit with those comments, makes a comment about how, maybe I should have a cowboy up here to talk about all of the cowboys who die in Western films. So there's a real sense, especially among people who make Westerns, that she hit a little too close to home.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like for John Wayne, part of Marlon Brando's point was he wanted to start by having this talk about the Indigenous people because right at this moment with everything that was happening in Wounded Knee, it was a really big, great moment to talk about it. But he really wanted to go after Hollywood for all of their racist depictions, including, and he would really single out John Wayne in the way that he made anti-Japanese films in World War II. He went after John Wayne across the board. And I think what made it hit doubly home for John Wayne was that he had just won his own Best Actor Oscar a couple years earlier for True Grit. He took it very seriously. It meant the world to him. And then I think it's 2-3 years later, some guy not only rejects the award that meant the world to him, but is also like, your whole career is garbage.
Yeah. Wow. But here's the thing. Brando's not wrong. You know what I mean? And this is what's even sadder is that this could be a speech given Sunday, right? Sunday at the Oscars, and it would still feel relevant. It would still be aren't we still doing this? It's still an issue that Hollywood does not want to address.
No, you're exactly right. And I think that's what I find so powerful about his moment is it's this 2-for, right? Not only is this speech delivered, that's looking at the Hollywood industry, but he won't even show up to deliver it himself. He lets lets Sacheen speak for him. And I think that kind of 1-2, not only am I saying what I need to say, but you won't even get my presence. Yeah. That to me is what makes it so powerful because honestly, people, there's a history of giving political speeches at the Oscars. We don't remember a ton of them, but he took away our image of him at the podium and he replaced it with a Native activist. And I think we remember images more than almost anything. Maybe you guys are like me. I can name what most Best Actresses were wearing before I remember what they said. And so it's like he used the power of memes before there were memes.
Well, and just that basic act of elevating the voice of the person who you're trying to, get heard is huge. I do want to do some of that longer history and thoughts on sort of activism and political statements at the Oscars. But there's a really fascinating backstory to how these two got connected, and I think it maybe fits into some of the story of her being written out of it, because I think people say like, oh, Brando picked this person to come make a statement, whereas in fact she had much more agency in it than I think people remember in terms of how they even got to this moment.
Yeah, I mean, Sacheen's whole history, like, she was, a girl who was born to, like, a white mother and a native father. And she talks about when she was a child, her mother would take her to the South, and she would not be able to use the same drinking faucet as her own mother, not be able to use the same bathroom. And yet she didn't really rise up as an activist until she went to college in the Bay Area. And that's when she really started taking place in protests. There was a huge movement right then where people were occupying Alcatraz to say, like, this is native land, we want it back.
We've done an episode on that.
Of course you did. That
Nicely
she really
done.
gets activated. So yeah, it's in this Bay Area that she winds up connecting with Francis Ford Coppola, their neighbors. And so she would go on walks around his neighborhood, and her story was that he would be like sitting on his porch drinking iced tea. And so when she heard that Marlon Brando was interested in Native American rights, she was like, let me see if this guy's legit. So she asked Francis for his address, and he was like, And I think eventually he did give in and give it to her. And so she introduced herself, and that's how they met. I mean, so yeah, but I think your point's exactly right. Like, it's not like he just picked out, a telegenic woman and put her in buckskin, which was how people tried to spin it. She was an activist who reached out to him. She was the president of the National Native American Affirmative Image Committee. He picked an actual spokesperson. Yeah. And I think that's so important.
I think people forget how active Marlon Brando was. I mean, most of us are familiar with The Godfather or his films or Streetcar Named Desire, sort of like the most iconic films. But, I think of the images of him and James Baldwin, like at the March on Washington. I think of him like protesting, and I think of, the film Burn is probably one of his least watched films. That came out in 1969. But I use that film all the time. Brando said, like, that's my best work. The film is about a slave revolution, a failed slave revolution. But some of that memory of Brando has been marginalized.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, he was, protesting for the release of, like, Nelson Mandela. Like, he even, turned down making films because, like, he was signed on to do a film in 1968 when Martin Luther King was shot, and it rattled him so much that he decided to not take a film that year. He started walking around the streets of Harlem. He, like, gave interviews that he thought he needed to use his time better to learn firsthand about the civil rights movement. He made, choices that weren't careerist, and I feel like he did the work. He put his heart into it, and it's so strange to me that, like, the Academy almost seems to have forgotten who he was when they gave him this award. It's like they thought, oh, he's been out in the wilderness making bad films and lost. Oh, we're welcoming him back into the cool kids club. Like, it felt like in that moment, Hollywood is kind of patting themselves on the back. Like, we're rewarding you. You haven't been nominated for an Oscar since the 50s. This is your big moment, and you should be so grateful to us. And he was like, why? This is not what matters to me. I think they took it as an insult, to be honest. Like a slap in the face.
For sure.
Oh, yeah. And I think that the story, in addition to Brando's activism, it just speaks to the power of activism more broadly because, he's not... The thing that he is responding to is not a new wave of racist depictions of Native Americans in films. He's responding to the American Indian movement and that new visibility and that new radicalism and that new presence that gives him insights into the struggles of Native Americans and obviously with Littlefeather as well. So it's one of those moments where you can really see how activism can move a national conversation, in part because of this enduring image of the Oscars.
Yeah, exactly. Because when he does this, not only are they in the middle of like that 71-day long occupation at Wounded Knee, where there was like a military cordon around like the hundreds of people who were there protesting. The FBI was actually refusing to let journalists go into Wounded Knee to even report on the occupation. So they were trying to do that thing of just suppressing information and not letting people even know what was happening in their own country. So she gets up there and she says Wounded Knee on television. Sacheen would say afterwards that she felt like the FBI specifically went to different producers in Hollywood and told her they weren't allowed to use her in any films or they would go after them as punishment for bringing up Wounded Knee on television. I mean, she has said that she was told that by several producers at the time, and she really didn't work again after this moment.
Yeah, she doesn't get much work, though, as we're saying. I think the issue gets the spotlight it needed or deserved. All right, let's take this bigger look at activism, political statements at the Oscars themselves. I'm curious, just in a larger sense, whether you feel like this platform is, I don't know, what's the word, appropriate, is used well, like when does it work, when does it not work, when does it come off as sort of ham-fisted? This feels like an example of it working, and so are there things in there that indicate why it may have? I don't know, just any thoughts here?
I will say this, that I can't remember the year, maybe it was 2014 or 2015 with Oscar So White. Mm-hmm. And then it was the following year, Oscar So White too. I mean, it's like still a so constant, yeah, still so white. It's a constant battle to get visibility and to get representation. But even when you get visibility and representation, it's a battle within that battle to tell a story that hasn't been told, or to tell a story that's not so tropey that it feels like it's a token. So, I mean, and this is across, I just remember when Crazy Rich Asians came out, and it was also a battle of can we make these films? Can these films make money? And then it became more about, well, the Oscars are so boring. Okay, let's get more popular films in. What about Black Panther? There's always this push to symbolically signal towards change, but actually not really make the change where it matters, which is behind the camera, in the rooms where things get greenlit, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that, there's almost this kind of cross-generational relationship. Jada Pinkett Smith said that when she boycotted the Oscars in 2016 over Oscar So White, she and Sacheen exchanged emails about it. It was kind of, she was I really admire what you did. I really admire what you're doing. And I love that kind of lifting up. I mean, for me, I love a dramatic political speech, and I love watching how awkward everybody is in the room, because it feels like high school. They're sitting there and nobody knows whether to clap or not. Some people start booing. I mean, when you go back and watch some of the political moments, there's intense ones. The one that always jumps out to me is when Michael Moore won for Bowling for Columbine, and he got up there and his whole speech, we had just invaded Iraq a couple days earlier, and you remember how crazy this country was then. He gets up there and he's like, we live in a time where we have this fictitious election. We have a fictitious president. We're going to war for a fictitious reason. And now we're all yeah, he was dead on. But when you watch that video, people are booing.
Yeah,
they are mad.
I don't know if he actually calls Bush a war criminal, but he comes pretty close. But, to me, I mean, I think that's a really striking moment, too. And I think some of the other moments, Kellie, that you mentioned, to me, those moments work in part because they are products of the work that person is already doing. And I think that's where it comes off as authentic and powerful. It's I'm here because I made a film that is trying to speak to some big issues, and now I'm going to speak to those big issues. Sometimes when it's I won an award for some rom-com, and then I'm going to talk about some, random thing out of nowhere. Sometimes, I mean, I will admit, I agree, people should use their platforms, talk about what you want to talk about. The awkwardness is great, but sometimes it is a little I'm trying to, square peg, round hole kind of thing.
But that's where I feel like Leonardo DiCaprio has always been an environmentalist, always been an activist about the planet. So when he won his Oscar, his speech was all about, global warming and how we're taking care of the earth or the lack thereof. And that felt pretty spot on for what he's always been talking about. I think it might be different to have someone, that we know is a misogynist talk about the Me Too movement.
I think you can also tell.
I would boo.
Yeah. Well, and the booing is really interesting because there are some political moments where somebody is just saying the thing that everyone in the room is thinking, and it's oh, he's taking such a stand by saying F Trump, and it's everybody in that room thinks F Trump. It's not the same kind of bold stand as the one that gets you the boos and the discomfort.
Yeah, have you guys ever seen the one where Vanessa Redgrave got booed in 1978?
No.
That was an intense one. She had just done, that year she'd done a documentary called The Palestinian that was about, the PLO, kind of being empathetic to the cause of fighting for land. But at the same time, she did a movie that was about the Holocaust, Julia, and she won for the Holocaust film. But because of The Palestinian, she was being picketed outside of the theater, and when she got up, she talked about it, and she talked about fighting fascism, she talked about McCarthyism, and then after she was done, not only were there sort of mixed boos and claps, but Paddy Chayefsky, the guy who wrote Network, comes out and he's like, a simple thank you would have sufficed, and everybody starts cheering for him, and it's like, Paddy, you wrote Network, you're such a hypocrite.
Well,
but yeah.
It's so funny because earlier when you were talking about how everyone in the room is taking themselves so seriously, and that's the charge sort of in both directions. It's this celebrity is taking themselves so seriously they think that they can make a political statement or whatever. But then it's the flip side of that is everyone is taking them so seriously that they think the Oscars is this sacrosanct space where you can't possibly speak your mind. You have to respect the institution and just thank the So I don't know. It's mostly people taking themselves too serious.
You're right. I mean, that's exactly what Brando said. When he was asked about it, he said that people felt and his quote is you're ruining our fantasy with the intrusion of a little reality.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's a good note to end on because that's right. Let's bring it back to Brando. That is a great quote. And again, we will see what happens at this year's Oscars. I mean, I think the context of a big war and then some very political films, I think we will see some stuff on Oscar night. But anyway, this has been really, really wonderful. Amy Nicholson, thank you so much for doing this. And everyone should go listen to Unspooled, really, one of the best film podcasts out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Nicole Hammer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Hello, my name is Sacheen Littlefeather. I'm Apache, and I'm president of the National Native American Affirmative Image Committee. I'm representing Marlon Brando this evening, and he has asked me to tell you in a very long speech, which I cannot share with you presently because of time, but I will be glad to share with the press afterwards, that he very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award. And the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry, and on television in movie reruns, and also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee. I beg at this time that I have not intruded upon this evening, and that we will, in the future, our hearts and our understandings will meet with love and generosity. Thank you on behalf of Marlon Brando.
Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. What is Odoo? Well, Odoo is an all-in-one management software with apps for every business need. Odoo has apps for CRM, accounting, sales, HR, inventory, manufacturing, and everything in between. And they're all in one easy-to-use software. And the best part about Odoo? All Odoo apps are integrated, helping you get things done faster and more efficiently. So, when you think about business, think Odoo. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's ODOO.com/thisday.
Radiotopia. From